Day 25 of the US-Israel war in Iran ended with fresh strikes across Iran, missile attacks on Israel, escalating violence across the Gulf and Iraq, and growing pressures for diplomacy. Even as military preparations continue, US and Israeli attacks have continued across Iranian cities. One strike in southern Tehran killed at least 12 people and injured 28, according to local reports. Elsewhere in the capital, explosions were heard east of Tehran, with bombardments destroying residential buildings and a school as Israeli forces launched a new waves of attacks on Iranian government infrastructure. Meanwhile, Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant compound was also struck, though Iranian authorities say the attack caused no damage to the facility. Israel has also intensified its attacks in southern Lebanon, where it has outlined plans to occupy territory up to the Litani River. At least 33 people were killed in the past day during Israeli bombardment, according to local authorities. In response, Iran and Hezbollah launched a new wave of missile attacks on Israel, targeting Tel Aviv and northern Israel. At least one person was killed and more than a dozen wounded, while millions of Israelis were forced into shelter as sirens sounded repeatedly. Another 7 people were injured in separate Iranian attacks, including an infant, as interceptions failed in some areas. Across the Gulf, Iranian drone and missile activity has continued. The United Arab Emirates says a Moroccan civilian working with its armed forces in Bahrain was killed in an Iranian attack, while several soldiers were also injured. In Saudi Arabia, air defense intercepted a ballistic missile and at least 11 drones targeting the country's eastern region, where the major energy infrastructure is located. In Jordan, authorities say shrapnel from intercepted missiles landed south of Amman, though no injuries were reported. Officials say hundreds of missile fragments have fallen across the country since the war began. In Kuwait, a drone strike triggered a fire at a fuel tank at Kuwait International Airport, the third such attack since the war began. Airport operations have now been suspended, with flights rerouted to Saudi Arabia, including Daman Airport. Authorities say 13 drones and 6 missiles were intercepted overnight, as repeated air raid alerts sounded across the country. Meanwhile, tensions are rising in Iraq, where the government has held an emergency security meeting after a suspected US strike killed 15 members of parliamentary group in Anbar province. Officials condemned the attack as a violation of Iraqi sovereignty and authorized paramilitary groups to respond. Iran's aligned militias, known as the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, say they carried out 23 operations targeting US bases across Iraq and the region over the past 24 hours. US warplanes have also been flying low over Baghdad, while drones targeted the US consulate in Erbil, with air defense systems intercepting the attack. At the same time, diplomacy is quietly unfolding. Reports in the US media suggest that the United States has sent Iran a 15-point plan aimed at ending the war, with mediators from Pakistan. Turkey and Egypt pushing for an in-person meeting in Islamabad within 48 hours. US President Donald Trump continues to insist negotiations are underway, saying Iran wants to make a deal. But the Iranian officials and parliament leaders have dismissed the claims as fake news. Meanwhile, the US is also preparing for a possible escalation. Washington is reportedly deploying additional troops from the 82nd Airborne Division, adding to the roughly 50,000 US personnel already stationed in the Middle East. Beyond the battlefield, the war continues to trigger a global energy shock. Qatar Energy has declared force majeure on several long-term LNG supply contracts after Iranian strikes damaged facility as Ras Laffan, the world's largest liquefied natural gas hub. The earlier attack knocked out 17% of Qatar's LNG exports capacity, potentially affecting supplies to Europe and Asia for years. Meanwhile, shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, the route for about 1/5 of the world's oil and LNG, has collapsed. Before the war, roughly 120 ships passed through the strait every day. Now, maritime data shows only 5 vessels transited on Monday. Iran says ships may pass through the waterway only if they do not support aggression against Iran and coordinate with Iranian authorities. The disruption has rattled global energy markets. Some analysts warn the oil prices could surge to $150 or $200 per barrel if the Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed. Canadian Energy Minister Tim Hodgson says the world is now facing one of the largest energy supply disruptions in history. Shell CEO Wale Sawam also warned that Europe could begin facing fuel shortages as early as April if the conflict continues. While talks are reportedly being explored, missile strikes, air raids, and regional attacks show the conflict is still expanding with no clear end in sight.